When you think about the practical use and limitations compared to bows, crossbows may actually seem kind of trashy, at least for military use. Hunting is a different story. So today I want to talk first about the drawbacks, no pun intended. I've been trying to cut down on my use of puns. Even though I'm not a dad, it still makes me feel kind of old. And then I want to talk about why they bothered with crossbows anyway, what they excel at, which is, in my opinion, just a couple of reasons. Okay, so what makes crossbows kind of underwhelming relative to the way they're often portrayed in fiction? Well, first off, they're more expensive to make than bows, usually. As always, it depends. Even though this is a munitions-grade crossbow, so it's kept simpler for a common soldier, as opposed to snobbish aristocrats who of course had to have the most decadent version of anything, always. Even this would take longer and be more expensive to make than a bow, generally. If you think about the steel prod and bow irons and stirrup and all the other metal parts, the trigger mechanism, all of that is going to be more labor intensive and also more expensive in terms of materials. There are, of course, many different ways to make a crossbow. You can stick to organic materials with a wooden prod, a nut made of horn, for example, or antler. The trigger can also be organic materials. You can really simplify it quite a bit. But of course, if you do, then it's not going to be a high performance crossbow necessarily. And I would argue that the quickest, cheapest bow will be more economical, if you will, than the equivalent crossbow. Second, they're heavier, as you can imagine, with all the metal parts. This is quite some heft to it, and it's forward heavy. Again, it depends on what it is. If you have a crossbow without metal parts, it's going to be much lighter than this, but obviously still heavier than a bow. There are Chinese crossbows, for example, that are basically a bow attached to a stock. As you can imagine, that's by definition heavier than just the bow itself. Third, they are bulkier, especially the type that has basically a full-size bow as a prod. They're not as easy to carry and they don't break down very easily. If you have bow irons like that, you can remove these wedges and disassemble it, take off the prod and rotate it so it's all aligned. Even then, it's going to be bulkier than an unstrung bow. Fourth, the rate of fire is pitiful. Depending on what kind of crossbow, this is not quite as bad. A fairly light one spanned via goat's foot lever or belt hook is going to be a lot faster than a heavy crossbow which needs a windlass. But no matter how much you practice, an equally experienced archer will turn you into a pincushion before you can shoot once. Fifth, as far as power is concerned, crossbows are awfully overrated, at least this type. When you think about how they're often portrayed in fiction, a crossbow is super powerful. It can easily punch through armor and all of that, but they're really not that great. Why? Because of the extremely short draw. With a bow, you have a much longer draw, so the string will keep accelerating the arrow over a much longer distance. This is a really short distance. Imagine drawing a bow like this. Impressive, huh? As said, there are different crossbow designs, like the Chinese ones I've already mentioned, that have a longer prod and a much longer draw. So they should overall be more powerful. They are just quite bulky. There are other designs with a longer draw too, although still not as long as an archer's full draw, like this Roman Arcuballista that Todd made. It's also a lot faster to load, but at the expense of power because it's a light draw weight. Of course, I should also mention repeating crossbows, which can actually be faster than a bow, but it's a case of min-maxing speed over power. The draw weight is rather puny, although poison bolts could be used. And crossbows like this generally compensate for the short draw with an extremely heavy draw weight. Like this here has a draw weight of about 300 pounds, which is roughly equivalent to probably about an 80-pound bow. I remember Todd mentioning the roughly equivalent poundage, but I wasn't entirely sure if I recalled correctly whether he said 60 or 80 pounds. So I tried to look it up, and here is yet another reminder to never trust what AI tells you.
A 100-pound crossbow may produce energy equivalent to a 500-pound longbow.
500 pound? That is some mind-boggling bullshit. Even a windlass span crossbow with a draw weight of 900 to 1,000 pounds is not as amazingly powerful as you might think when you hear that draw weight. Now, modern day crossbows made with current materials and technology are a whole different story. They have a much longer draw, their bolts are almost as long as arrows, and the kind of energy and velocity they can generate is scary, straight up. And sixth, from personal experience, crossbow maintenance is a bit of a pain. I've had to tighten the string a number of times, and I've had several mechanical malfunctions with medieval crossbow reproductions, whereas bows, for me, have always been hassle-free. As usual, the more complexity, the more potential for mechanical failure. Well, that might seem like a lot of reasons to save money, forego the crossbow, and go for the bow. But it has some strengths, and significant ones. So first off, you can just load the crossbow once, and now you're ready, indefinitely. You can hold someone at bow point, and that's it. I mean, you might get a little tired from holding the bow up, particularly if it's a heavy one, but you can also do it Hollywood style. I mean, you're still threatening them even if your accuracy is garbage from the hip. As long as you're close enough, who cares, right? So that's a pretty substantial advantage. That also particularly applies when hunting. Just like with a firearm, you can have it loaded, ready to go, and stalk prey, and it's available at a moment's notice without having to draw first. Not that it takes terribly long, but it's a little bit quicker and more convenient to have it ready to go. By the way, if you've got a span crossbow and don't want to use it at the time, do not dry fire it, right? If you do, all the energy that normally goes into propelling the bolt is now absorbed by the crossbow. So that's pretty hard on it. Instead, use whatever spanning device you have to gently reset it, like that. A bow, on the other hand, if it has any significant draw weight, unlike what the movies would have you believe, you can't just casually hold it at full draw and just have a conversation or whatever and stand there for minutes at full draw. It does not work like that, okay? Unless you have a modern compound bow. They have what's called let off, where you only have to overcome the resistance to a certain point, and at full draw, you're only holding about 30% of the draw weight. So yes, in that case, it is quite easy to just stand there and take your time and aim for as long as you want. You can be pretty relaxed about it. With historical bows, it does not work like that. You would have to fight the full draw weight the entire time. Speaking of fighting the draw weight, that's a second advantage of crossbows. As a guy with 2 ruined shoulders and elbow, even a bow with fairly light draw weight is painful for me to draw, especially over and over again. A crossbow, on the other hand, I could shoot all day, no problem. If you want to recruit crossbowmen, as opposed to longbow archers, they just don't need anywhere near as much training. Both in building up the back strength required to shoot a longbow. If you think about a 150-pound longbow or heavier, that takes a tremendous amount of training, particularly, again, to do it a number of times in succession. If you can draw it once or twice, okay, but if you have to do it dozens of times, that's a different story. So much more training required for that than for learning how to operate a crossbow. And also aiming with a crossbow is easier than with a bow, I find. And finally, there are situations in which you can use a crossbow much more effectively, like in confined spaces and behind cover in particular. Think about the pavis that crossbowmen used as a mobile cover. It's a shield that you just stand upright and you can be behind it and reload the crossbow and then pop up over top of it and shoot a bolt and then get behind cover again. And that's about it. Let me know if there's anything you think I forgot to mention in this comparison. But I hope you found it interesting. Thanks for watching and take care, folks.